Okay, so we move on to the second core skill, which is to construct and write the essay on the analyzing argument exam question. Just to recap, we've done the first four steps initially, which is the three key readings to pull out various information methodically, and then we've structured that in a table for the fourth step, so that we're very clear what our contention is, what the key arguments are, and the evidence and the audience impact or audience positioning is for those key arguments. So, again, before we get into the templates and the writing skills, the key thing to keep reminding ourselves of in this is that this particular part of the exam is all about how the authors are persuading or positioning their audiences through whatever media form they're using. So the essay has to explain the tools that are being used to support the author's various arguments and contentions. So as we're constructing the table, doing the readings, and then writing the essay, we have to keep asking ourselves, what are the arguments that are being presented by the author? How's the language being used to support these arguments? And what's the intended impact on the audience of using this kind of persuasive language? What position does the author want the audience to take? Okay, so there's a number of templates depending on what media forms we're using in the exam. So let's just quickly go through those. Okay, so the first template that we can look at is for the exam question, which has a long text and then one or two visuals, like a picture, an image, a photograph, something like that. And then what this essay structure will consist of is an introduction. There we can think of the acronym COAST, which is contention, outline of issue, audience, style, tone, overall tone. And then the body paragraphs then, follow a fairly similar structure. So body paragraph 1 is going to be the first argument, the topic sentence, the persuasive strategies that we've identified through the evidence, the quotes and the meta language being used, how that's attempting to position the audience, and if there's an audience impact or expected reaction. As we go through, then body paragraph 2 and body paragraph 3 follow exactly the same structure. The conclusion then goes back over the overall point of view, the big picture, the overall style and visual, and then the overall audience impact linked to the purpose of the media form. Okay, slightly different template for another different set of media forms. Let's just have a quick look at those. Okay, for a template, when you have an exam question which gives you a long piece of text and then some short response text, maybe it's blog posts in response to a blog, or maybe it's an email in response to a post, or maybe it's an email in response to a letter, and so on and so on. So long text and then short responses. The suggested template here is again an introduction with COAST, body paragraph 1, long text argument 1, the topic sentence, what persuasive strategies, how it positions the audience, what audience impact or reaction. So pretty much the same thing as for the first template example. If we move up, the body paragraph 2 is the same thing. So the first two arguments from the long text. And then we look for a connective to move into the third body paragraph, which is going to be the shorter text comparisons. And there we have their topic sentences and so on. So the conclusion for that particular template would be to compare the text overall in terms of their points of view, language style, audience impact, linked to purpose. Okay, and then I think there's one more template that we can think about. Okay, and then the third suggested template is when you have an exam question which gives you 2 or 3 texts of similar length, so there's no difference between the length of the text. In this case, the suggested template is first to do the same kind of introduction, coast, then to do the first paragraph to look at the key argument for text 1, with the topic, sentence, persuasive strategies, how it positions the audience and so on. Then to use a connective to move into the second paragraph, and that is to look at the key argument from the second text, i.e. you're comparing text 2 with text 1, looking at the persuasive strategies, the key quotes, meta-language, whether there's any audience positioning, the appeals to audience and so on. Then you move on to the third paragraph, which is the second argument for the first text, and then you use a connective and you go into the fourth paragraph, which is the second argument for the second text, i.e. again you're comparing the second text with the first text, same kind of thing. If there's other texts, this is probably the time to bring in the other text and do a fifth paragraph where you're comparing the other text, so text 3 or 4, whatever it might be, with the first 1 or 2 texts, or the key contention from the first text. Okay, and then the conclusion there is same kind of thing. Okay, so let's now move on to have a look at how this goes to the Inc. example that we were looking at. Okay, let's bring that up. Okay, so if we look first of all of what an example introductory paragraph might be for the answer to the power of Inc. exam question. If we remind ourselves, we're talking about coast here, contention, outline of issue, audience, style and tone. We might start off with these example sentences. In her popular street blog, Street Beat, Helen Day uses social media to discuss the change in attitudes toward tattoos. That's presenting the issue, the media form and the author. Then we go down in her post, The Power of Ink, Day contends in an authoritative and confident and at times humorous tone that the tattoo has lost all its connotations of deviance and criminality and instead now has become a fashion statement. They were talking about the overall tone and the key contention mentioned. Day appeals to her 12 and 615 readers through her language choices and visuals with the aim of persuading her audience to think twice before getting a tattoo for trivial reasons. There we start to introduce the idea of audience appeal and audience positioning. And then the final part of that first paragraph, the introduction, the 4 comments in response to the blog post use a range of tones from hurtful to upbeat and respectively claim that tattoos are unique, not individual, are culturally significant and carry medical risks. 3 of the comments support Day's point of view, while 1 comment reflects the author's earlier attitude to tattoos. So here we just make quick reference to the other media forms that are presented in the exam question. Okay, so we move on to the body paragraph, the first body paragraph. Okay, so for the first body paragraph after the introduction, we're essentially using the Peel template or whatever it is that the school is using. So we make the point first of all. Here, Day argues that the tattoo has lost its power to commonality, making the title of the blog post, The Power of Ink, ironic. There, we're introducing the contention, and argument 1 is that the tattoo has become common. The bold sentence at the start of the post outlines this contention, and by using once assigned versus now, Day is introducing or foreshadowing the historical context of our argument, which is the next argument. So that's again supporting the contention. If we then continue, okay, and again, just to remind ourselves that this is all being taken from the table, where we structured the evidence to support the arguments from our third reading. Day immediately appeals to her youthful followers with an inclusive statement, everyone has a tattoo these days, which also supports the claim of commonality. Day follows this with even me, which establishes her authority to make the claim of commonality and familiarity with her audience. So, there we're introducing the idea of audience appeal. And how she identifies with her audience. Carrying on, Day's language choices further appeal to her audience. For example, the reference to the mega shopping centre and the humorous anecdote of suburban housewives who are compared to prisoners. Again, picking up on some of the quotes, the meta language that we're using. Here it's an anecdote. And again, thinking about audience appeal, how the author wants the audience to react. Moving on, the commonality and more unattractive image of tattoos is further established when Day makes reference to newsreaders, sitcom stars and upmarket shoppers who are identified as having diminished the power of the tattoo. This positions the audience to consider the choice to get a tattoo which would make them part of the crowd. Again, picking up on the evidence, the quotes which we picked up to support the point that we want to make, and this one again is thinking about the audience, how the author wants the audience to react. And then the final paragraph here, Day's inclusion of the visual of a book cover, titled "No Tattoos Before You're 30," with the image of the tattooed shoulder. Serves to support her argument that getting a meaningless tattoo while you're young could become a decision later regretted. And here, we're making a point not to forget the visual evidence. We have to make sure that we use every media form, visual, speech, whatever it might be, that's given in the exam question. If we miss something out, we're going to lose marks. Okay, so that's the second paragraph, which is the first argument. The second body paragraph is going to be the second key argument. So let's just move on and have a quick look at that. Okay, so the next paragraph introduces, again with the Peel format, the second key argument. And we can begin like this. Day uses a tonal shift to begin the historical context of the tattoo, signposted by the single sentence, "It was not always so." And this more academic narrative shows how tattoos were symbolic of deviants and criminals in the past, which is in contrast to the modern attitude to tattoos as a fashion statement. So here we're introducing the second argument, which supports the main contention. The use of unattractive terms such as slaves and prisoners is an intentional appeal to the audience's conscience, as references to unconsenting, incarcerated and deviant prisoners undermines the idea that tattoos are fashionable. So that we're using the evidence which we gained from the third reading to support the point that we're making. Okay, in this manner, Day is seeking to persuade the audience that tattoos are undesirable. There, the audience impact. This argument is further supported by Day's reminder that tattoos were used to mark Jews during the Holocaust, a dark time in our history that will shock any reader. Okay, and if you're shocked, then you're probably going to think twice about getting a tattoo because you don't want to be associated with that Holocaust. Okay, so again, audience persuasion. Day employs an image of the Tomoko tattoo as a proud symbol of identity which has strong connotations of culture and heritage. This visual strengthens the rationality of Day's argument, prompting her readership to question the trivial nature of tattoos in many instances when compared to the status they have in Maori traditional life. So, picking up on the serious visual that Day introduced, that helps to support her argument by contrasting. Okay, and then the final paragraph in this particular, the final point in this paragraph, Day's argument shifts to her own experience as an angry young thing and the choice to defile her femininity with a tattoo when she was young and rebellious. Okay, this is, again, picking up on the quotes, which is the evidence to support the point. Her youthful readership will certainly identify with this anecdote in context of the tradition of defiance, youthful defiance, we might say. However, Day then explains her regret of that decision as tattoos have now become sexy, rendering the symbolic nature of her tattoo meaningless. Okay, so again, we're picking out the evidence, and how that evidence is persuading the audience to take a certain viewpoint. Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. Okay, and the final argument that we had is the next paragraph. So we can say here, Day finds the commonality of the tattoo profoundly annoying, as she is now stuck with a tattoo that is no longer a symbol of her defiant youth, but simply a cosmetic quirk. Here, picking out the key quotes which helps support the point that we're making. An observation that will make her readership think twice before getting a tattoo, and that is the third argument which supports the contention, tattoos have become common and meaningless. And then the final point that we make in this last paragraph is Day concludes her blog by repeating her contention. The tattoo has become commodified, which, after educating her audience on the past symbolism of tattoos in history, illustrates how the power of ink has eroded. She draws attention to this fact by combining assonance in ornament, ordinary, and other with the alliterative cosmetic quirk. Okay, so picking up on some of the evidence which draws attention and supports the key argument. Okay, and then I think there's one more paragraph that we need to talk where we just summarize the findings of the other responses in the media form. Okay, so again, the first point of this first sentence of this final paragraph, Day invites her audience to comment on the issue of tattoos, and the 4 replies vary considerably. So here we tell the examiner that we're looking at all of the things that are included in the exam question. Tash argues that her tattoo makes her unique, and using colloquial language such as "my mum was wrapped" will engage with other youthful peers who believe tattoos still have meaning. Okay, so that one's in support of tattoos. In strong contrast to this point of view, Dr. A.B. highlights the various medical risks of getting a tattoo which may generate fear within the audience and cause concern for personal safety, persuading against tattoos. Clearskin uses humour and irony with an unattractive visual reference to faded and stretched dolphins. Here, again, picking out the key quote, to counter any aesthetic argument in favour of tattoos. He further supports Day's point of view by claiming he is a rebel for choosing not to have a tattoo. So there we're picking the evidence that supports, the arguments of the different responses to the key blog. Okay, now in the final post, Kiwi describes the cultural significance of the tattoo for his family using a hurtful tone and suggesting the imitation of cultural tattoos is tantamount to identity theft. Kiwi's question, "How would you feel?" forces readers to question the morality of getting a tattoo simply for fashionable reasons, which further supports Day's contention and mirrors her use of the Tomoko visual in her blog post. So the final evidence of the response which supports the argument and contention. Okay, so that is the sort of suggested example, model answer. Okay, and that is derived all from the 3 key readings, the table structure, and then using the right template to communicate the ideas. Okay, so I'll make 2 points here. The first point is yes, some of this sounds kind of eloquent, or it's very language dense. You may find it beyond your abilities, perhaps, how you structure your sentences and how you make it sound so grand and educated. But that's something which is going to come with practice. So the more you practice putting into words the evidence that you've derived from the readings, the better you'll get at structuring your sentences to make them sound as eloquent and educational, or however you want to describe it. And then the second point that I would make is that this is something that you have to keep practicing. It's not something which is going to happen overnight. You've got to keep practicing this over and over and over again. The two key skills, the reading and picking out the correct information, structuring it properly, and then putting it into words in the proper template. So 2 things to practice. Now, I've gone through this extremely quickly for timing reasons. I'm going to send this model answer to you on a separate PDF file so that you can look at it and study it in a bit more depth. Okay, thanks for this. Right, so the next thing is we will move on and do another exam question, a model answer, so that we can keep the same methodology and see how it applies to another kind of question. Okay, thanks for your time. Bye.